In 1879, the Silver Creek Saloon perfectly embodied a frontier town. Dusty, noisy, reeking of whiskey, tobacco, and a hint of peril. The gold rush drew a motley crowd to this tiny Colorado settlement, miners flush with cash, drifters seeking jobs, entrepreneurs chasing wealth, and men intent on burying their histories. I was quietly sipping whiskey in the corner when she entered. I'm Thomas Wheeler, having reached 42 that autumn. For 2 decades, I'd roamed the frontier, drifting from one ranch to another, never lingering long enough to truly belong. Rootless and familyless, I had nobody who'd notice if I vanished come morning. Once, I fled from a thing best left forgotten, and that flight turned into an ingrained habit. Standing 6'2" with shoulders broadened by years of labor, my dark brown hair brushed my collar. A thick beard gave me a tougher appearance than I truly possessed. Rough, scarred hands, and a face etched by sun and wind. She couldn't have been more than 18, with wavy dark brown hair cascading down her back and delicate facial features. She was accompanied by 3 miners, older fellows flushed from recent strikes. She laughed excessively at their humor and danced in a manner far too provocative. For someone her age, she wore an ornate white lace dress, far more elaborate than the local seamstress typically produced. That gown hinted at expenditures she ought to have avoided. She was putting on a persona that didn't quite suit her. I saw that plainly. Having spent 2 decades observing people's acts, I'd mastered looking past the facade to the frightened soul beneath. She went by Sarah Morrison. I was acquainted with her father, or had been, years before his passing. Richard Morrison was a decent fellow. He'd carved a ranch out of nothing and treated his hands fairly. He succumbed to a gangrenous infection when Sarah was still a babe. His legacy for her was simply his absence. However, I knew her mother. Catherine Morrison was known throughout the territory, the widow who single-handedly maintained her ranch, somehow building it up rather than letting it decay. She was tough, beautiful, with a beauty forged by adversity rather than ease. With striking dark features and flowing black hair, she was utterly beyond reach for someone like me. Catherine was 42, my own age, yet she bore herself as though she'd lived twice those years with twice the resolve. Her bearing radiated dignity, a silent fortitude born of enduring loss and pressing onward. Over the years, I'd spotted her maybe a dozen times around town. Every time, a knot tightened in my chest. Now her daughter was heading down a disastrous path. Sarah had downed her 4th glass. When one miner began fondling her arm, she laughed it off, yet her eyes betrayed terror, the sort of fear no girl her age should ever know. "That's enough," I declared, rising to my feet. The words escaped before I could think. The miners stared as if I'd staggered in from the desert, raving. "The girls had plenty to drink," I said evenly. "I'm taking her home." "She's with us," growled the largest miner, his hand drifting toward his holster. "Not anymore," I answered. Truth was, I wasn't a quick draw, never been particularly skilled with firearms. But I was a large fellow, 6'2", broad-shouldered, with dark brown hair and a thick beard. That made me seem tougher than I really was. My hands bore scars from labor, my face etched by weather. My threat didn't come from a weapon. It came from my lack of fear. The miners backed off, one even laughing as if the whole thing were a joke. I approached Sarah, whose expression blended gratitude and mortification. "Does your mother know where you are?" I inquired. She slurred back. "She believes I'm at church. No need for her to know anything." "Come on," I said, extending my hand. "Let me take you home before things escalate." She accepted my hand without hesitation. That small gesture, her tiny hand in mine, her trust in a stranger, launched the whole tale. The journey to Morrison Ranch lasted roughly half an hour. Sarah rested in front of me on the horse, drowsy, her hand now and then falling against my chest. She reeked of whiskey and perfume mingled with road dust. At one point she asked, still slurring, "Why did you help me?" "Because someone ought to have," I replied simply. Little more was said. The night remained still. Only the rhythmic clop of hooves on compacted ground, the wind whispering through the canyon that wound toward her ranch, and a coyote's distant howl. The Morrison Ranch looked just as I recalled. A sturdy log cabin, well kept but unpretentious. A barn in fine shape, robust fences. This bore the mark of someone who truly cherished her creation. Light glowed from within the cabin. Sarah recognized we were home, snapped upright, and panic washed over her face. Mom can't see me this way. She'll realize I've been drinking, that I went to the saloon, she pleaded. Then let's pray she's asleep, I suggested, though I doubted it. A mother rarely rests easy when her child is out there. I dismounted first and then assisted Sarah down. She was steadier on her feet, the chilly night having sobered her a bit. Yet the whiskey scent still clung to her, and her dress was rumpled from all the dancing. Come, I said, guiding her onto the porch. Let's get you inside and to bed. But the door swung open before we could knock. Sarah Morrison stood silhouetted by the lamplight within, wearing a plain cream nightgown trimmed with delicate lace, her long dark hair plaited loosely down her back. At 42, she was my age, and she looked even more beautiful than I recalled, despite being weary and afraid. Her posture held a momentary command of respect. Her eyes revealed the same terror I had witnessed in Sarah's gaze. When the miner touched her arm, a mother's fear for her child left alone, dreading the worst. Then her gaze met mine, and a change crossed her face. She knew me. Years earlier, I had worked at a ranch nearby before leaving that region. We had exchanged maybe 3 brief greetings, nothing deeper. Yet I could tell from her eyes that she recalled the incident. She moved closer and asked, "Is Sarah hurt?" I answered quickly, "She's fine. I just helped her get back from town." Catherine looked at her daughter, noticing the rumpled dress, the whiskey smell, and Sarah's ashamed look. "Sarah," she said sharply, "go inside now." Sarah rushed past her mother, and Catherine turned to me. "Thank you," she said, gratitude in her tone, but also another emotion. It was a look of recognition, as if she understood that my actions went beyond merely rescuing her daughter. It was about showing her respect. I said anyone would have done the same, but Catherine insisted no. I had no plans to stay. I'd brought her daughter home, and that was all. I meant to ride out at dawn, heading to the next place needing help. But as sunrise touched the canyon, Catherine discovered me saddling my horse. "Wait," she said, now in a simple day dress, hair braided and pinned. In daylight, she seemed stronger, more composed. I said I don't need payment. She replied that's why she's offering work. She needed help with autumn tasks. Fence repairs before winter, training new horses, cattle work. Payment would be $30 a month plus food and a cabin on the property. It was honest work on honest land, she said, just through November. After that, you're free to leave, but I'd appreciate the help while I need it. I should have declined and ridden away without looking back. Getting involved with a widow and her troublesome daughter was sure to complicate a man's life. I had spent 20 years avoiding entanglements, but when I looked at Sarah Morrison, I spotted something I'd been searching for my whole life. A woman who had created something genuine, who had endured heartache and kept moving forward. She was asking for my help, not out of desperation but practical need. "All right," I said, "I'll stay until November." She nodded, as if expecting it. "There's a cabin near the south pasture, about a quarter-mile away. You can settle there. We'll start work at dawn." The next 4 weeks were the toughest and finest of my life. Catherine wasn't one for many words. We toiled side by side from sunrise to nightfall, fixing fences, taming horses, readying the ranch for winter. We spoke when needed directions, observations, logistics, but mostly we just worked. Amid that labor, something developed between us. I started to comprehend her. I discovered she moved with intention, never wasting energy. She had a sharp mind for land management, reading terrain like others read books. She loved her horses with the patience and fierce protection some reserve for children. One afternoon, about 2 weeks in, she showed me how to break a young stallion. Her confidence and understanding of the animal were so captivating that I was watching her instead of the horse. "You're not focused," she said, catching me staring. "I am," I replied, learning by observing. She gave a genuine smile, unlike her usual polite one. It made her appear younger, less weighed down. "Watch the horse," she instructed me, but I was watching her, and I think she knew. Sarah kept her distance after that first night. She was ashamed, I think, at being caught drunk by a stranger. She was angry at her mother, whose disappointment had been biting and relentless. But as weeks passed, she softened. She would watch me work, then began helping with minor chores. By mid-October, she asked about the ranch, how to assess a horse's temperament, the best way to repair a fence to withstand winter. One evening, while Catherine and I checked the fence line, she remarked, "Sarah is warming up to you." I wasn't certain she would. I said, she had reason to be angry at the situation and at me for being part of it. Catherine said softly, "She's learning about consequences, why I worry, why some freedoms are really traps." She paused, gazing across the darkening field. After my husband died, I believed I had to shield her from everything. But maybe she needed to make mistakes and realize their true nature. I asked, "Did you learn that mistakes teach?" Catherine was silent for a while. Finally, she said, "Yes. When my husband died, I learned that love's price is the risk of loss. Since then, I've wondered if the pain is worth it, whether it's better to have loved and lost than never loved at all." I wanted to tell her that watching her work, her intelligence and strength, made me believe that real love is worth any cost. But I had no right to say that yet. Everything changed in October. We were working in the North Pasture, moving cattle to fresh grass before snowfall. It was demanding physical labor. By afternoon, we were both exhausted. We stopped at a stream to water the horses and rest. Catherine sat on a rock. I sat beside her, keeping a proper distance. She asked, "Why did you really help Sarah?" I thought about lying, giving some noble reason like duty or decency. Instead, I said, "Because I knew her mother. I couldn't stand the thought of her being hurt. Not just Sarah, you. I couldn't bear you being harmed by something beyond your control." Catherine turned to look at me, her eyes revealing vulnerability she usually hid behind strength. "I was so angry with her," she said quietly, "for being reckless, sneaking out, putting herself in danger. But mostly, I was terrified that I couldn't protect her anymore, that she's becoming a woman and I'm losing control." "You're not losing her," I said. "She's just discovering herself, and you're still there guiding her." Catherine asked, "Is that what you're doing, discovering yourself?" I turned to her fully. "I spent 20 years fleeing a past I couldn't confront, running from connections I feared, from any place that might matter. I told myself it was freedom, but it was really fear." Catherine asked softly, "What were you running from?" I looked at the stream for a long time. A woman I thought I loved. I was young, reckless. We planned to build something together, but when things got hard, I fled rather than stay. I let her down, and then spent 20 years ensuring I never disappointed anyone again by never staying long enough to matter. Catherine listened without judgment. I thought I knew who I was, a man who moves from place to place, who belongs nowhere, who shouldn't care because caring leads to loss and regret. But being here, working this land with you, watching you every day, it's changing how I see everything. It's changing who I am, and now I'm uncertain. I said, and I'm terrified of that uncertainty, but even more terrified of leaving. Catherine didn't pull away when I reached for her hand. She let me hold it, and we sat like that for a long while, hands together, watching the horses drink from the stream. "I'm scared too," she admitted. "I'm 42, and I've built a life that works. I'm uncertain whether I have the courage to gamble on something so unknown. But I'm staying." I told her, "No more running unless you ask me to leave." Catherine replied, "That's what you say now, but come next month or next year, after the newness fades, won't you feel confined again?" "I was confined before," I said, "confined by fear and by flight. This, you, the ranch, this existence, is the complete opposite of confinement. For the very first time, I had the sensation of being precisely where I belonged." Catherine looked at me, and I kissed her. A soft kiss, one that posed a question instead of requiring a response. Her kiss in return confirmed I was utterly and permanently captivated by her. "Stay," she breathed against my mouth. "Please don't go." "I will," I vowed. "I promise." November arrived far too soon. Our arrangement was for me to labor through that month, and then decide if I wished to continue onward. From the start, Catherine was very explicit. She never requested a permanent commitment from me. She wasn't willing to endanger her emotions with such a vow. She simply wanted help during autumn and whatever connection was developing between us, no strings attached. Yet we both recognized that something had fundamentally shifted. Sarah appeared to grasp that before we did. Over the weeks, she grew warmer toward me. She noticed my respectful treatment of her mother, my work without seeking thanks, and how I genuinely engage with her as an individual rather than as a child needing supervision. One afternoon, while Catherine was indoors getting winter provisions ready, Sarah discovered me mending a stretch of fence. "You'll remain here, won't you?" she asked. I hesitated before replying, "Your mother requires steadiness. She needs to understand. My mother requires a person who won't abandon her." Sarah interjected. "She's been solitary for ages, and though she's tough, toughness can be isolating. You're the only one I've ever observed her being tender with, the only one she's allowed herself to develop feelings for. Your mother has to decide for herself," I responded cautiously. "I'm not the one to make that call for her." "I understand," Sarah acknowledged. "Yet I can say this. Regardless of her choice, I wish you'd stay, because she's more joyful than I've seen her since we lost my father. Both that fact and she herself mean a great deal to me." I felt deeply touched that a young woman I'd known for under 2 months was concerned enough to speak honestly. On November's final day, I informed Catherine that I was not leaving. We were in the barn attending to a horse that was soon to give birth. The creature was agitated, obviously in labor, and Catherine stayed the entire night to ensure a smooth delivery. She had performed this task countless times, bringing foals into the world, witnessing new life arise on her property. I remained by her side, and we perched on hay observing the mare, anticipating the foal's arrival. The horse moved restlessly, pushing, while Catherine murmured calming words in a soft voice, her hands unwavering as she monitored the advancement. At about 3 in the morning, just as the foal started to emerge, I whispered, "I'm staying here." Catherine didn't appear shocked. Her attention was fixed on the mare. Yet I noticed her slight nod, acknowledging what I'd said. "I've pondered this for many weeks. I continued from the moment you gave me employment, from that kiss beside the creek. And even though it's merely 2 months, I'm also certain I don't want to endure a single additional day apart from you. I don't wish to return to fleeing." Right then the foal arrived, a vigorous male with his mother's dark coat. Catherine and I observed him as he fought to stand, as he searched for his mother's milk, as he took his initial genuine strides in the world. The mare whinnied softly to him, full of protection and affection. Catherine rose, brushing straw and dampness from her clothing, and faced me, her eyes glistening with tears she hadn't shed. "I'm not sure this is prudent," she confessed. "I'm uncertain I could bear losing you. If you have any doubts, allow me to demonstrate that I will never leave." I pleaded, "Give me an opportunity. Give us a chance." Catherine remained silent for an extended pause. Finally, she uttered, "I love you, Thomas. I believe I've loved you from the night you brought my daughter back unharmed. From the moment I realized you could have taken advantage, but you didn't. But you didn't, and that's when I understood that honorable men still exist, and perhaps one might be ready to remain. I have little to bring to this," I admitted. "Hardly any money, no property of my own, only my hands and my eagerness to labor. But I can give you loyalty, companionship, and a man who will never flee again." Catherine then approached me, and I clasped her to my chest. "I require very little," she replied. "I need only you," she said. "That's everything." Catherine drew back to gaze at me. She was drained from the sleepless night, her dress soiled with straw, her braid unraveling. Yet her eyes sparkled and she grinned. "Yes," she agreed. "I do." We wed in the springtime with an itinerant minister passing through Silver Creek. The ceremony was modest, only ourselves, Sarah, and a few longtime neighbors of Catherine's. These neighbors had observed her striving to manage the ranch single-handedly. Sarah wept with joy. Catherine donned a gown she crafted from white cotton, plain yet refined, with wild blossoms woven into her hair. I put on my finest attire, which was humble, yet Catherine insisted they were flawless just as they were. After the vows, we strolled home. Catherine clasped my hand while Sarah walked ahead, granting us privacy but glancing back now and then to beam at us. "Are you content?" Catherine inquired as we made our way along the path back to our ranch. "I'm scared," I confessed, frightened that I might somehow ruin everything, that I might awaken one morning to discover I blundered, that I'll revert to past habits and cause you pain. "Then we're alike," Catherine responded, "for I'm also scared. However, I've discovered that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's feeling afraid, yet still opting for love." She gripped my hand tighter, and I raised it to my mouth. pressing a kiss to her fingers. "I'm grateful," I expressed. "For what?" "For risking your heart on a stranger, for trusting that I could remain." Catherine answered, "Thank you for being a man deserving of that risk." 3 decades elapsed, and Catherine and I constructed a shared existence. We enlarged the ranch, assisted Sarah in finding a worthy partner, a cattleman from 3 counties away, and observed her establish her own ranch close by. Our grandchildren matured on the soil we cultivated, acquiring skills in riding, roping, and comprehending the cycles of the frontier. Catherine's hair grew white, and her posture stooped somewhat from years of labor, yet her eyes stayed keen and perceptive. My fingers became knotted with age, but they remained capable of constructing, mending what was damaged, and embracing her at night. I preserved the small cabin I'd occupied during those initial months. We never demolished it, so it served as a testament to our origins. One evening, as we sat on the porch, gazing at the sunset above the canyon, a sight now deeply familiar, Catherine turned to me and posed a question. "Do you ever have regrets about remaining, wedding a widow with a challenging child, creating this existence with someone so fearful?" I clasped her hand, still firm and able despite its years, and answered, "Not for one solitary moment. You provided me with a home, Catherine, a sense of direction, and a motive to cease fleeing. You taught me the meaning of being part of something, of someone, a present I never realized I required until you presented it. You granted me friendship," she responded, "and you gave me an equal partnership. You demonstrated that life doesn't cease when you lose someone. It merely alters its path. It transforms into something novel, possibly even superior to what existed before." We sat in quiet contemplation then, observing the sunset and hearing the ranch's nocturnal sounds. Somewhere far off, a coyote howled. The breeze swept through the canyon leading to our residence, bringing smells of sage, horse, and soil. I reflected on the night I escorted a drunken Sarah home from the tavern, how that minor act of assisting an unknown girl had resulted in everything significant in my life. How a single instant of kindness had rippled outward, altering not just my own existence, but also Catherine's, Sarah's, and many future generations. "I'm thanking you," I stated. "For what?" Catherine asked, her voice carrying a grin. "For having the courage to permit me to remain. For gambling on a wanderer. For caring for me even when I doubted I was worthy of affection." "I thank you," Catherine responded, "for being the sort of man deserving of the risk, for being the type who halts his flight, for being a man who remains." The ranch continues to function to this day. Many generations later, the log cabin has been enlarged, yet the initial building is still there, maintained as a historical keepsake. The barn remains upright. The fences Catherine and I mended continue to delineate the boundaries, enduring winter gales and the passage of years. Yet the most significant thing, enduring beyond structures or acreage, is the romance that commenced when an intoxicated young woman collapsed into a stranger's embrace. In a frontier watering hole, it's a narrative of fresh opportunities, concerning a man who had devoted his entire existence to fleeing, ultimately discovering a cause to halt, a tale of a widow who mastered self-reliance, then discovered the strength found in partnership, a daughter realizing that her mother's openness wasn't frailty, but the ultimate form of courage. This narrative explores how life's pivotal moments often arise from a simple, selfless act toward a stranger. Such a gesture can create waves of transformation, impacting not only yourself but future generations. I shared this narrative with my grandson shortly before my passing at age 87, 5 years after Catherine had left this world. I explained that life's essence isn't found in grand spectacles. It's about being present, acting with integrity even when it's troublesome. It requires the courage to accept love and to give it freely. Your grandmother, I said, embodied the greatest strength I've witnessed. Her resilience came not from avoiding falls but from rising each time. Her capacity to love persisted despite pain, not in its absence. I was blessed with 30 years of observing, collaborating with, and cherishing her, a gift beyond what many men receive. It was more than I merited, and my gratitude will last forever. When he inquired about regrets, I replied, "Absolutely none. Not a single one from the instant I lifted that inebriated woman from the Silver Creek Saloon's floor." That tiny, apparently trivial instant marked the true start of my existence. I shut my eyes, a smile spreading as I recalled Catherine's visage, illuminated by the lamp on that inaugural evening, the sensation of her palm against mine. I reminisced about 3 decades of awakening next to her, engaging in purposeful labor, and living a life that eventually became coherent,